Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Toylist Titles. My name is Justin Stevens, and we're back with another special off-season bonus episode. Another one of them, their breakdowns, and this one is from Tennessee. We have our man Tyler Rowland from the Locked On Titans podcast. You all know my buddy George, so we're just going to go straight to Tyler here, man. How's it going tonight? And thank you for coming on.
Yeah, doing fantastic. I know that it's not quite football season yet, but having OTAs and mini camps and all that stuff the last few weeks, it's been a baby preview of training camp, and it's got me fired up for some football.
Absolutely. It's always football here at Toylist Titles. Am I right, George?
Oh, that's all we do is football here. Every once in a while, Justin tries to get me into doing something baseball related, but nope, we're sticking strictly football here.
Hey, go Redlegs. Hottest team in baseball, baby. Let's go.
Oh, there you go. It sounds like I might have another friendly fire guest. I totally had a question. You threw me off with the red legs, but it was actually going to be for you, George, and now I'm stuck. Oh, yeah, no, you mentioned sometimes I get you to do other things like drafting our meals this Sunday night for the favorite all-time guest list that we drafted 3 weeks ago on the Fun Day Draft Show. So a few weeks ago, if you want to go back and check it out and see what our favorite guest list was for our individual tables. And I believe my buddy Kenny Bowe actually won that one in the Twitter polls. So this week we're going to be drafting our favorite meals to go with them. But just to lead right into it, somebody that I thought was going to absolutely eat this season was going to be Tyjae Spears before they brought on Pollard. Kind of the same running back there, and I got to admit, Tyler, I am the house Colts fan here, and I really wanted to find a way. Even though the Colts didn't really need a running back, I wanted them to find a way to not only get Tyjae Spears last season, but also trade back in the draft to get Will Levis. And then my rival division team got both of them. But I'm really more interested in that running back. I think you probably knew I had to start there. That's kind of like the biggest, especially for us being fantasy football guys. But
right, fantasy,
even for legitimate football, they're kind of the same package here. So how are they going to utilize these two in that same backfield?
Well, I think you have absolutely a great read on it here, Justin. Like the Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard are similar, and I think that was the goal for the Titans when they went out and got Tony Pollard, because last year with Derrick Henry, the last few years, look, Derrick Henry is a fantastic player. I'm sure Baltimore's going to be up by 1 million, and he's going to get 1 million carries all season long, so Derrick Henry's going to do well. But the problem is when you have Derrick Henry in the backfield, he can't run a Texas route out of the backfield. He isn't running a running back wheel route down the sideline and out racing a linebacker and catching the ball on the run. Like, there are just certain limitations that you have schematically when Derrick Henry's in the game. And you also are more predictable on offense when Derrick Henry's in the game. So now the Titans can go to an offensive system under Brian Callahan that's much less predictable. And with those running backs being used interchangeably, the running back on the field isn't going to determine and tell the defense, hey, here's what we're working with. Here's the cards in our hand. So I think for the Titans' perspective, that's important. But from the fantasy perspective, I think both of them can be usable running backs. I think the reality of the fantasy community now, we know there are very few bell cow running backs. Basically, any running back is going to be a part of a committee. And I think although Tony Pollard getting signed does hurt the Tyjae Spears fantasy experience a little bit, I think that both running backs are still going to be productive. And in the current running back landscape, where it's just hard to find a hammer RB1 that you can trust all the time, I think both of them are still very viable options. I lean towards Tyjae Spears being running back one. I think that Tyjae Spears is just the more explosive, younger player right now. But I think that Tony Pollard could actually be more of the red zone running back. So from that perspective, it could be a situation where Spears gets a little bit more work, couple more touches, and maybe some more yards. But Pollard could be more of the touchdown scorer out of those two. So I think that's something that people should keep in mind when deciding. I think you could probably get Tony Pollard maybe a little later in drafts if you're playing with smarter guys who know about Tyjae Spears. And then you're getting a guy who's probably going to score more touchdowns, which with the limited work could be more helpful. So I actually think fantasy Pollard might be a better option by a little bit, but in real life football and effectiveness, I think that Spears has a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, I agree. I've been telling people all offseason I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think. So, George, what do you got for him?
Man, this podcast, the Tolis Talis podcast, has been a huge fan of Tajay Spears all the way back in to his senior year in Tulane.
Yeah.
I got to watch him at the Senior Bowl. Got to interview him there. Great kid. He's definitely one of our favorite running backs. So I'm glad to see he's going to get a good opportunity here in Tennessee because I think the kid is special, and as long as his knee holds up, I think they've got themselves a really, really good running back there.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Let's talk a little bit about the wide receivers. Like they've completely remade this wide receiver room. They already had DeAndre Hopkins. They bring in Tyler Boyd. They signed Calvin Ridley. From the outside looking in, I think they way overpaid him. But I want to get your perspective on the wide receiver room. Did they really overpay Calvin Ridley like I think they did, or is it just my perception of that?
Well, I think whether you want to say he's worth what they paid is a personal thing, but I think when you look at the market, I think he's paid pretty accurately, especially all these contracts. When he first got his paycheck, when he first got the contract, he was top 10 in the NFL in average annual value, like his average salary per year. But now we've seen A.J. Brown got a new deal, and we saw Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, and now Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Ayuk and Higgins are left, and CeeDee Lamb, they're all going to get paid too. So by the time all those guys get paid, Calvin Ridley is going to be the 16th, 17th highest paid wide receiver in the league based on average annual value. And I think that is absolutely fair. Look, last year he came back and he was with Jacksonville. And there are a couple of different factors here. Number one, he was coming off almost a 2-year absence in the NFL due to injury and gambling suspension. And he's even said in the offseason this year that last year felt like a rookie year all over again for him. And he was with a brand new team. So that aspect, I think that you got to keep that in mind. And then you also add Jacksonville totally misused Calvin Ridley. They were using him in the X wide receiver role where he's the isolated guy. He's on the line of scrimmage getting pressed. Calvin Ridley is a Z wide receiver, a movement wide receiver. You want him off the line of scrimmage, coming in motion before the snap, being able to use his speed across the field. I think the Titans, who brought over Jacksonville's passing game coordinator as their offensive coordinator, somebody who has talked about how he's going to have a different role in Tennessee because he knows he should be in a different – I mean, he's not going to crush Doug Peterson, his former employer, but Nick Holtz, the offensive coordinator for the Titans, knows Calvin Ridley was miscast last year in his role in Jacksonville. So you add in coming off the 2-year absence, you add in being misused in his role. I think that set Calvin Ridley back. And we say that, and I say that, guy had 75 catches, 74 catches, 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, he did have a good
So that
season.
was a down year with all of those adversities to fight through. So I think this year in the proper role with DeAndre Hopkins as the guy on the other side, opposite of him, with this offense that's going to use him right and having his bearings again, knowing what it feels like to be in an NFL training camp and start an NFL season, I think Calvin Ridley will be the number one wide receiver for the Titans. I think you're looking at, similar catches, 75 yards, but with Will Levis's ability to bomb the ball, I think you're going to get 1 or 2 big plays from Calvin Ridley a game, like a 30-yard catch. So he may not have a million catches, like he's probably not going to go for 90, 100 catches, but I think he's going to go for a good amount of yards because Levis wants to drive the ball down the field. And look at last year for the Titans. DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks, Nick Westbrook-Akine. If you look at the separation data, guys who separate, all the Titans guys are in the bottom left quadrant, which is the last place that you want to be. Calvin Ridley is a speed player who's one of the best and most advanced route runners in the league. He fits perfectly with what the Titans needed desperately, the speed, the route running, the separation. So I think that Calvin Ridley is going to be an excellent option at wide receiver. And the Titans were the second worst team. I say worst because I hated it. You would say the second least or fewest, whatever, in terms of their pass rate in neutral situations, like first, second down, just neutral situations. The Titans had the second lowest pass rate in the league. Well, the Bengals have been at the top of the league for a while, and Brian Callahan, the new head coach, is a quarterback guy, so they're going to throw the ball a lot more anyways. So even with Hopkins and Ridley, I think Ridley is the better option, the more explosive option, even if I think Hopkins is a very good option too. I think he's going to be especially if you I play in 3 wide receiver leagues or 2 wide receiver, 2 running back, 2 flex. So you're basically playing 3 or 4 wide receivers every week, no matter what. So to me, you need 3 good wide receivers, no matter your league. And I think Hopkins could be a really good wide receiver 3, maybe pushing wide receiver 2.
So you mentioned Treylon Burks, and that made me want to bring him up. There were some comments coming up from the coach saying that he's going to have to earn his playing time through special teams. Like, this is a former first-round pick, and it wasn't a long time ago he's a first-round pick. That's not something you really hear from coaches coming from, talking about players who are drafted as high as he was. What is going on with that? Bless you, Justin.
Well, I have my personal opinions on the reasoning. I personally don't think that Treylon Burks is a very hard worker. I don't think he's a guy who loves football. I think he's a very laid-back personality, Southern kid. He likes to hunt, likes to fish. He's just a very laid-back person who I don't think has the obsessive drive that you need to be a high-level professional athlete. And I think the Titans coaching staff, this has been a conversation in the Titans online community for the last few months, because at one moment the coaching staff will say, oh, he's been excellent. He's been everything that we wanted and more. His effort, his energy is an A+, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's cool to say, which any good coach is going to praise publicly and then, critique privately. So they're saying
absolutely.
that. But then at the same time, they go out and pay Calvin Ridley $90 million.
Right.
They go out and pay Tyler Boyd. They draft a slot receiver in the draft. Like, all their words say, hey, we love Treylon, he's doing great. And all their actions say, we cannot count on this guy at all. You know what I mean? So
right.
I think that Treylon Burks has talent, but if you go back and look at his college tape, and I admit, I was excited about Treylon Burks when it happened. I was too high on my own supply on that one, okay? You go back and look at the tape. He's running vertical routes and jumping over smaller guys. He's getting screens and doing all his work yards after catch. He's a gadget player. He doesn't run routes well. He doesn't understand route nuance and craft. So maybe he could improve with the 2 veterans, Ridley and Hopkins, helping him out. But I personally just don't think that from a fantasy perspective, you just can't count on Treylon Burks. And it's so sad to me because you look at Justin Jefferson, the 22nd pick, Garrett Wilson, we've seen plenty of first-round wide receivers. Even Jackson Smith and Jigba come out. You guys like Tajay Spears. Here's a stat for you. In one season, a third-round running back in Tajay Spears has more catches and yards than Treylon Burks, a first-round wide receiver, in 2. That is a stat for you if you want to like Tajay Spears, which I do. I just don't think Burks has the mental makeup to be a high-level player in the NFL. He kind of reminds me of Corey Davis. He's not as productive as Corey Davis, but Corey Davis never had you know what I mean? He didn't have that Mamba mentality as a guy who's a big Kobe fan. He just doesn't have the grit, that look in his eyes of I'm going to rip your heart out. He doesn't have that, whatever that is in a personality trait, whether it's football or life. Burks just doesn't have that. And if you don't have that obsessive drive in pro sports, you won't ever be at the top. So I think he won't be with the Titans after next year because his rookie contract will be up after 2025. And I think the Titans are going to use him like a gadget player, rotate him in, look to get him kind of schemed up touches, not just let him be a wide receiver. They're going to try to get the ball in his hands in creative ways. And from a fantasy perspective, I just don't think that's a reliable option. Now, Hopkins is 32. Calvin Ridley is going to be 30 during the season. Tyler Boyd is going to be 30 soon. Older players get hurt. It's not like they're bad now. They just get hurt more often. So if you're in a deeper league and you want to stash Treylon Burks and wait for an injury or something like that, I don't think that's a terrible idea. But Treylon Burks can't be looked at as like a starting option or even like a handcuff or anything like that. You're playing with dynamite, quite honestly. If you draft him anywhere high, you want to take a risk late in a deeper league. That makes sense. And from a football perspective, I just think the Titans have told us that they don't trust him. They don't really want to be relying on him at all either. So Burks is a disappointment, one of my big misses when it comes to draft analysis. I'll be honest, we all miss, and that was a miss for me. It's unfortunate because it was the A.J. Brown trade, right? And that makes it even worse,
that makes it even worse.
Doubles how bad it is from my perspective. But yeah, unfortunately, no matter what we hear, good or bad from the coaches, I think they told us how they feel with their actions this year, and I just don't think you can count on Burks whatsoever.
All right, so I agree with you completely that the Titans have done everything in their power this offseason to show that they're going to be a very pass heavy offense. They want to throw the ball a lot, and we saw Will Levis at his best, and unfortunately, we saw him a lot at his worst last season. Is Will Levis going to be able to take that next step? Have you seen anything that makes you feel like he's progressing this offseason? And if he doesn't, you still have Malik Willis, and now you have Mason Rudolph. Not exactly, prize winners in that quarterback room with them.
Well, I guess you're right. There's no other way to put it other than we saw high highs, man. Like the way he rips the ball, his quick release. I know that anybody who's a fan of a different team may, bat their eyes at this or whatever, but he has one of the top 5 quickest releases in the NFL. It doesn't mean that he's an elite player, but he's got an Aaron Rodgers-like quickness to how he gets the ball out of his hands. And I would say he probably has top 5 arm strength in terms of not only his ability to throw the ball down the field, but his velocity. Now, those raw physical talents don't mean that he's going to be a great player. And he was lauded for how intelligent he was, great scholar, 4.0 student, academic All-American high school type stuff for Will Levis. But what I would say is the physical ability isn't going to be the problem. It's going to be the mental processing, because so far in the offseason, he's been a little late, according to reports. He's been a little late on some throws. Guys have been open and he sees them a little late, and he can rocket it in there and still get it there. But, a lot of people are athletically talented in the NFL. You got to win with your mind too. So for a guy who's praised as being so intelligent and smart, it's funny how the mental side of the game and processing quickly and seeing the coverage, that's really where he has to take a jump this year. And it's been a little slow early on, but second-year player, brand new offense, totally different offensive terminology, and totally different offensive approach as well from what Mike Vrabel wanted to do. All new faces around him, new offensive line, and we're talking about stuff in June. He should make mistakes, and this is when you make those mistakes and okay, we've run this play 2 times. The seam comes open a split second early. I got to get there. So if Levis is still having timing issues and progression issues at the end of training camp as we get into early August and into the preseason games, then I think it's time to maybe put a red flag up like, is this guy going to get it? You know what I mean? But for right now, I think that Levis has showed that, he has all the raw talent in the world, has a great arm, and let's give him some time to learn the offensive system under Brian Callahan, who's worked with Peyton Manning, Matt Stafford, Joe Burrow. Like, he's a quarterback guy. So I have faith that he can get him to good. He's going to have to be on his P's and Q's with the mental stuff to get to great. But I think for fantasy purposes, especially, he's going to throw the ball enough and throw it downfield enough that I think he's kind of a sleeper for a quarterback. And if you're in a 2-quarterback league, super flex league, something like that, you absolutely can take a chance on Will Levis if you're somebody who maybe got pushed out of the top 20 quarterbacks. I don't think Levis will go in the top 20 in some of those drafts. So I think he's a really good sleeper option if you're trying to get some value at the second quarterback position. And if you're somebody who likes to roster 2 quarterbacks in a 1-quarterback league, I think taking Will Levis in the last round, something like that, it's not a bad option, because he could go nuts in this new system with now he's got Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd compared to what we talked about earlier. And the Titans had one of the bottom 3 offensive lines in the league. Levis only played half a season and was sacked the second most time of anybody in the league, only playing half a year. It was a disaster. So just the better support around him, wide receiver, offensive line, coaching, he's got to be a little better, and he could be a lot better if things break right. So you could get some good value on that if you're looking to have 2 quarterbacks on your roster.
So,
George, I think I saw security back there behind you in the Titans locker room. So I'm gonna play a commercial and give you a chance to break away from it for a second.
Okay.
Are you ready to take over your fantasy leagues and become a champion? Get the edge you need and join the Toilets to Titles Patreon today to get exclusive access to our T2T staff, weekly waiver wire shows, and Patreon exclusive leagues like our signature Frankenstank League. Members enjoy other amazing benefits such as monthly giveaways featuring autographed jerseys, collectibles, Yeti coolers, and more. Sign up now for as little as $9.99 per month and dominate your fantasy leagues like never before. Visit patreon.com/toilets to titles and let us help take your teams to the championship this season.
So I left the locker room. I just barely made it. Thank you, Justin. So you mentioned the offensive line and Will Levis getting sacked a lot. They obviously addressed that within the draft. They drafted J.C. Latham, which I'll be surprised. I was kind of surprised they took him. When I did my first 32 first-round mock draft, I had them taking an offensive tackle because I knew it was a need. I had them taking Fashanu, but they took Latham. That's fine. But what have they done besides the drafting of J.C. Latham? Did they bring in any free agents that are going to help bolster that offensive line? Can you talk a little bit about the offensive line in general?
Yeah, 100%. So there's two different things. There's acquisition and then there's coaching. They also brought in Lloyd Cushenberry, who is veteran center, played at Denver last year, was one of the top 3 pass blocking centers in the NFL. Last year at center, the Titans had Aaron Brewer, who ended up going to the Miami Dolphins. He is the smallest starting offensive lineman in the NFL, and he would just get bowled over. So you had first-round pick Peter Skoronski at left guard, who had an emergency appendectomy in week 2 and lost a bunch of weight and was not himself for most of the year. But then you had the worst pass blocking left tackle spot in the NFL with the most sacks allowed from the left tackle spot. And you had the worst pass blocking center in the NFL. And then on the right side, it was just mishmash put together because of injuries. So they were just outright terrible. You add J.C. Latham, who I like Olu Fashanu as well, but the Titans are transitioning to more power offensive linemen, where with their zone approach with Derrick Henry for a few years, they were looking for more mobile, agile offensive linemen. So Fashanu, I called him Fashanu for months and then found out his name was Fashanu, and it's just been a disaster trying to say it right every time. But J.C. Latham is much more of a power player, and I think he's much more of a pro-ready player versus Fashanu. So I think that Latham was the right choice for the Titans. And the second part of it is not only do they add Cushenberry, they add Latham, but Bill Callahan. Bill Callahan came over with his son, Brian Callahan. Bill Callahan is considered the best offensive line coach in the league. Maybe Jeff Stoutland at Philadelphia could be in that mix as well. But Bill Callahan was just put in the Hall of Fame for assistant coaches. It got the #1 assistant coach in the NFL award, was just given to him this week by his son. How cool would that be? Your son presenting you really a major award like that. But Bill Callahan has totally revolutionized the offensive line. And last year, the Titans fired their offensive line coach they had most of the time with Mike Vrabel, and they promoted his assistant, who had never been a full-time solo position coach before. So not only did the Titans have terrible talent last year, they had terrible coaching as well. And the guy got hired as an assistant offensive line coach again. So just somebody, I don't want to say his name and be rude, but he just wasn't a good enough offensive line coach for the talent the Titans had. Bill Callahan is the total opposite of that. So you get much improved coaching on the offensive line. You get 2 new players, and the Titans brought in a vet minimum signing at right guard in Sadiq Charles, who has plenty of starting experience for Washington, but was an up and down player with high highs, but some really mental mistakes. Bill Callahan, if he gets him right now, Sadiq Charles is slated to be the starting right guard for this team. So they could have 3 new starters, brand new coaching. I don't think the Titans offensive line is going to go from bottom 5 to top 5, but if they're just league average, it would be an incredible breath of fresh air for Titans fans based on the last few years.
Yeah, you don't need to have the #1 offensive line. Listen, it's nice to have the #1 offensive line. Don't get me wrong.
Of course.
At least have a competent one is what you kind of want.
Yeah, and it would take time for the Titans to have that. The thing is, you look back at the Derrick Henry run and the A.J. Brown run of 2019 and 2021, the Titans had healthy Taylor Lewan, prime Roger Saffold, Ben Jones, one of the most underrated players of the last decade in the NFL at center. I mean, they had Jack Conklin at right tackle, who's gotten 2 huge deals now, and Nate Davis is a young guy who's pushing people around. Like, the Titans had a really good offensive line, and everybody just focused on how good Derrick Henry was because that's what we do, you know what I mean? The skill guys, but the Titans need to get back to having a great O-line, and it's going to take them probably this year and next year for that to happen. But if it's just decent and not bottom 5 in the league like it's been the last 2-3 years, it's going to be a boon for the skill position players and the fantasy relevant players as well.
All right, we like to hit every single position, and so far as a Colts fan, you're not making me too happy because I feel like this team is going to be quite improved from last season.
They'll be better
from the way you're talking.
Yeah.
And then so the next question is not at all fantasy based. We already know what we have with Okonkwo at the tight end position. So it's more of like, because since our viewers mostly do view him in a fantasy football light, like what is he going to be able to do for this team? As far as like, I understand there's an improved offensive line. Maybe he helps out there. I don't know. Like what is the plan for the tight end game with this offense?
I have bad news for the Okonkwo lovers out there, but also good news for those paying attention. Okay. Well, I personally, you can go back, Locked On. So I'm the host of the Locked On Titans podcast, all that. But Locked On does a live draft show every year. And you can go back and look to the year that Okonkwo was drafted in 2022. After the Titans picked Malik Willis, they had me on for my 5 minutes to talk about the pick. And I said, they need to go get Okonkwo next. Go get the tight end out of Maryland. He is the one. And they did it. They did it. They went out and got him next. And I think that Okonkwo is going to be like a Jonnu Smith type player, in the sense that he makes big plays, and when he makes big plays, he looks good doing it because he's a smaller tight end. He's fast. He's got good wiggle to him. He looks good. I would tell you, Josh Wiley, who I also was real high on, tight end out of Cincinnati, who the Titans took in the 5th round last year. Okonkwo is like 6'2", 230 to 240 pounds. Josh Wiley is more of your prototypical Y tight end, your inline tight end, hand in the dirt. Next, Okonkwo can't be that. He's too small. He's never going to be a one-on-one blocker against D ends. And the Titans are going to be heavy 3 wide receiver sets under Brian Callahan. They're going to play a ton of 11 personnel, and that only leaves 1 tight end. When the Titans were with Mike Vrabel, they played a ton of multi-tight end sets, and then you can have 1 big-bodied guy and have Okonkwo as that secondary tight end. So I don't think that Okonkwo is – I think because of the volume increase in passing, he could produce pretty similar to what he did last year, like, 400 yards, 40 catches, somewhere around there, if I recall. I think he can do that again just for volume, but I would look as a sleeper, Josh Wiley, the second-year tight end. I think he might end up being the Titans' starting tight end for technical purposes, and he may actually get the most reps of the tight end position. Him and Will Levis have a great connection, and we've been hearing so far in the all-season workouts every day, oh, Josh Wiley caught a long pass from Will Levis. Josh Wiley up the seam. Josh Wiley made an incredible, body adjustment catch on the sideline. He's just a bigger bodied guy who I think can play more consistently within this offense. So while I do love Okonkwo, I think that him and Josh Wiley are going to split stuff so much. I don't know if either of them are going to be fantasy relevant, but I think that Josh Wiley is kind of a sleeper, not just from fantasy, but just watching football. Wiley is a little bit of a sleeper to be the Titans' actual tight end 1.
So that means George. George, I might need you to stick around after the show for a quick second to help me decide who to drop in my really deep dynasty league, because I just noticed that Josh Wiley is available. So
there you
go. Your mic keeps going like this. It's in and out, Justin.
It's like Will Levis, a little up and down.
Yeah, it's I don't know what it's doing. But I'm gonna say go with get Wiley and drop your quarterback 1. So we've danced around it a little bit. We've talked about the coaching staffs a little bit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, big change at the front there with Mike Vrabel being out stepping aside, and they're bringing in Callahan. I think we talked about it a little bit with them going to a more pass-heavy offense. Is that the kind of scheme that we're expecting to see with them with Callahan at the helm?
Yeah, 100%. I think you look back to the Cincinnati Bengals, a lot of West Coast elements in terms of getting the ball out quick. We've heard Brian Callahan talk so far this offseason, like, hey, pass, because all of the people want to ask about the offensive line because it's been such a disaster for the Titans. And Callahan has said himself, like, hey, you can help the offensive line by getting the ball out quick, and your wide receivers can help the offensive line by getting open quick. I talked earlier about the separation numbers and how the Titans were so poor in the separation department with their wide receiver group. Well, getting open quicker will help the Titans as well. And I think they're going to throw the ball more. I think we've already heard the players in the offseason talking about, hey, we're going to throw the ball more on first and second down. Hey, we're going to look to pass the ball more. Like, everybody's talking about it. And I think all the reports from all-season workouts and practices indicate that as well. So I think where the Titans have been kind of shunned a bit in the past, in fantasy specifically, because, hey, they're going to give the ball to Derrick Henry a ton. They don't throw the ball a lot. I can't trust them. I think that the Titans could go to being a team who throws the ball the most in the NFL. Like, they could go from least to first in terms of passing the football. So I think that's helpful for fantasy too.
Yeah, because everything that they've done so far this offseason, rather, it looks like it's gearing more towards a pass-heavy offense, which traditionally, you think of Tennessee, you're not thinking pass-heavy because you got King Henry in the backfield, and you got to respect what that man can do with the ball.
It's been 25 years, George. It's not just King Henry. It's since I've been a fan for 25 years. It's Eddie George, ground and pound, play defense. Chris Johnson, Kerry Collins, ground and pound, play defense. Derrick Henry, ground and play. Like, I've been saying all season, as a Titans fan, I'm so excited because the Titans are promoting Ran Carthon, promoting Chad Brinker, an analytics guru who has his own IP models that he brought with him from Green Bay for injuries and for snap counts and stuff like that. Like, the Titans are currently transitioning from a mom and pop shop to a Fortune 500 company. They're going from Main Street to Walmart this year. Like, it has been a total evolution. They've beefed up their analytics. A couple years ago, former Titans general manager John Robinson was asked by Danny Kelly, who I don't know where Danny Kelly is working now, but great football personality. I think The Athletic. He does a show with The Athletic now, but he was working with The Ringer at the time. And he asked John Robinson at the Combine about his analytics department. And John Robinson looked at him and said, I am the analytics department. Like, that's where the Titans were in 2018. And now they brought Sarah Bailey over from the Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams, an analytics person. She's doing a great job getting the team ready. Chad Brinker, like I said, has his own IP models, his own personal IP that he uses and created. Like, the Titans hired more analytics staff. Seth Walder, the analytics guy for ESPN, he does like an article every year that says how many analytics folks each team actually employs, and the Titans and the Commanders were always last on the list, like 0 or 1. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So now the Titans are catching up with the rest of the league, and hey, we got to win on the data side of this too. I think that the Titans have, the Titans have been historically injured the last 3 years. Used 91 players on their roster in 2021, an NFL record. Had 34 players go to IR at one point in time in 2022, the most that season for any team. Like, they have been behind on sports science and recovery and the right equipment and using the correct data and having the right people. So they've beefed up the sports science department. They hired a couple more people to be involved in that this year. They beefed up the analytics and just used analytics recently. So there is a total fundamental shift this year for the Titans as an organization from, hey, we're old school mom and pop, beat you up, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It's not just the schematics of the football team that are evolving and modernizing. It's the entire operation of the organization. And that's what has me fired up the most for this Titans team. I know everybody kind of freaked when Vrabel got fired because Vrabel is a household name. He's got that. Every man wants to be like Mike Vrabel. Rootin', shooting, tootin', strong, big, aggressive, alpha male. He is everything that we have been told our whole lives is football. That's what a man looks like, coaching football, So I get why everyone was so high, but I keep saying Mike Vrabel is a good coach, but he wasn't the right coach for this young Titans team that needed to evolve and modernize. He needs to take over a team with veterans that's ready to compete right away, that doesn't need a ton of development. They're just ready to go in and be led. Like, I thought he would be a good fit for the Chargers, but Harbaugh is a better option. I get that.
Yeah.
But it made, the Falcons, a team that's ready right now, that he doesn't have to develop young guys and have patience and all that. He can just lead the ship. You know what I mean? They just need a real adult in the room. So I love what the Titans have done this offseason with the coaching staff, with the organization, with the roster. I don't know that they're going to be great because there are still major holes on defense, and the offensive line is still a question, and Levis is a question and all that. But I think they're at least good process, taking the right steps forward. And that's what really has me most excited as someone who's watched this team be behind the rest of the NFL for the last 25 years.
You mentioned 3 really good running backs, and I need to know which one was your favorite: Eddie George, Chris Johnson, or Derrick Henry?
I guess it's complicated. So I'll just say this. Eddie George is the reason I picked the Titans, because I am from Ohio and I loved him at Ohio State. And that was part of the allure when me and my brother at 9 years old decided to be Titans fans, was Eddie George. So I have like a nostalgic, heartfelt connection. He's a big reason why I picked this team that I cover for a living now. You know what I mean? And I owe him in that way. Chris Johnson was like in my high school and college time where I was like having a good time and seeing him break off these big, huge runs while I'm having some beers at the frat party or whatever. Like that was, that's a different level of energy, unmatched. Like, but I think that the right answer is Derrick Henry and what he's done to get the Titans out of the 10-year rut that they were in. And, the Titans are such a nationally forgotten team. Derrick Henry made people remember the Titans. Like you could not ignore, even fans of other teams were like, man, that Derrick Henry, he's awesome. And that's not normal for Titans fans. And also I mentioned professionally, I started covering the team in 2019. And Derrick Henry, along with A.J. Brown, who I think was the better player and the real engine of the team, was A.J. Brown. He was the MVP of those teams. But Derrick Henry in 2019, going for 2,000 yards in 2020, going for 1,000 yards in half a season in 2021, like a lot of my professional success is due to Derrick Henry's career. Like that's just real. So while they're all have a different place in my heart from a different time, I think if I'm honest, Derrick Henry has to be the right answer.
Yeah, when I think of Eddie George, the one thing that comes to mind is the him and Ray Lewis. They're back and forth.
He was my favorite linebacker.
Yeah.
I used to dance like Ray Lewis before Pee Wee football games. Like I would come out and do the Jake and wear a cut sleeve off a T-shirt on my head and be number 52. Like I was a linebacker, a little pudgy linebacker in Pee Wee football. But, I loved those guys. So watching them battle was great. You're 100% right. They're like connected in a way.
Yep.
Whatever it takes to intimidate the other little kids.
Yes. Yeah. Well, when you're 5'0" against 5'6", 5'8" guys, you gotta be crazy out there. I'm like running around being nuts, trying to intimidate any way I can, even though I'm, just yay high.
So speaking of your amazing linebacker prowess, let's move over to the defense a little bit. We're not going to go through every single position. I like to kind of group the whole defense together. But we've talked a lot about what this coaching staff is going to do for the offense. So let's talk a little bit about some of the new pieces on defense that have moved in and maybe the new direction for this whole new look Tennessee Titans on defense as well.
Yeah, so they hired Denard Wilson, who's their new defensive coordinator, and I would say that Denard Wilson was the hottest defensive coordinator candidate on the coaching market this year. He had 5 interviews if you count his own team, the Baltimore Ravens. So he was with the Jets in 2021 when they had a great defense, and then he was with the Eagles when they had the number 1 pass defense in the NFL, and then he goes to the Ravens and was part of the number 1 pass defense in the NFL. A lot of people look at Denard Wilson as like a young DeMeco Ryans, like he could have that type of career trajectory. You know what I mean? Because he's been so great and he's so well regarded. They're going to be a pressure defense. He's already said press or less. Like we're pressing you or we're even more in your face. You know what I mean? So they're going to press people. They're going to bring pressure. They're going to bring cornerbacks and linebackers. And they've added some pieces up front, but in the secondary, they add L'Jarius Sneed, one of the top 5 cornerbacks in the NFL. They add Cheeto Awuzie from the Bengals, who has had a couple injury-plagued years, but when he's at his best, he's a physical, I'll call him 1B corner, And then Roger McCreary in the slot at cornerback is one of the most underrated slot corners in the league. There's only 4 players last year who gave up 0 touchdowns in the regular season. L'Jarius Sneed and Roger McCreary are 2 of them. So the Titans secondary should be much, much improved, where they had one of the worst cornerback rooms in the entire NFL. They attacked that in free agency with the Sneed trade. They drafted a guy out of Louisville. So the Titans tried to make their secondary better. You still have Jeffrey Simmons, who's all world up front in the middle of the defense. Harold Landry came back from an ACL and was fantastic after the bye week last year. really looked like himself. Where you worry about the defense, honestly, is the interior and linebacker. So they drafted T'Vondre Sweat, the big nose tackle out of Texas in the second round. And it was a very hostile time for me, but I did not like the pick. I called it terrible. I said it was a disaster, horrible pick, super reach, bad character guy, like not a hard worker, weight issues, conditioning issues, drinking issues. Like this does not make sense, and this is not a good pick. But I could be wrong, and he could be Dexter Lawrence. He could be Haloti Ngata. He could be Vita Vea. And if he's that, then I'm an idiot, and this is great for the Titans. Awesome. But right now, outside of Jeffrey Simmons, they lost to Nico Autry. They didn't have anybody else on the interior. They got a bunch of practice squad guys, in my opinion, backup interior defensive line. And then at linebacker, they lose Azeez Al-Shire, who I think he got overpaid by the Texans. He's just an average starter in the NFL. But all they did was bring in Kenneth Murray, who I think is a terrible player from a starting standpoint. He may fit the scheme because he's a good blitzer and they want to blitz and go downhill, but he is just lost in coverage. And then they're relying on an undrafted free agent from 2 years ago, Jack Gibbons, who's one of the least athletic starting linebackers in the league. Smart, physical, great, but he doesn't have the athleticism to run or cover. And they drafted a guy named Cedric Gray out of North Carolina in the fourth round, who is more of an athletic coverage backer, but that's a rookie. So you're going to have Kenneth Murray, one of the worst starting linebackers in the NFL, and then a rookie fourth-round pick as your two starting linebackers. Like, in the middle of the defense, the heart of the defense, they're really in a questionable spot. So the defense, I think, could be worse, but the Titans average 17 points a game. So if the defense is a little worse, but the offense is a lot better, they still have a chance to win more games. And I think the Titans are a, 7, 8, 9 win football team right now. So we'll see what happens with the defense. But yeah, there are definitely some holes over there. But I think the change in philosophy and having Denard Wilson as the leader on defense, I think we'll see some improvements in some other places that should help as well.
All right, Tyler, it's been an absolute blast having you on. Your energy has been absolutely unmatched. I am going to ask you probably the toughest question you've had posed to you this week. I hope you're ready for this. You could take any player in the NFL outside of quarterback. Quarterbacks are off limits. Take them from the team they're currently on, and you could put them on the Tennessee Titans. Doesn't matter about salary cap implications. Doesn't matter if it puts you over the cap. Doesn't matter. You're just like a little vending machine claw. You're going down, you're grabbing a player, just plucking them and dropping them on Tennessee. Who you take?
I will go with the person who actually I'll go with Micah Parsons. I think that while it's alluring, it would make sense for me to go offensive line. Like if I took the best left tackle in the NFL, like I would want a young guy, of course. Say I went Tristan Wirfs or, you could still get Laramie Tunsil, although he's 29 years old now or whatever. That's still young enough for offensive tackles. You could go with one of those left tackles and then kick J.C. Latham to right tackle, and now you have maybe one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. That is tempting, but if you put Micah Parsons, the Titans need edge help really bad, in my opinion, across from Harold Landry, and they also need off-ball linebacker help. Well, you get both with Micah Parsons,
you get both,
and he's only 24 years old or whatever. Yeah. He's an absolute dog. If you have Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, and Micah Parsons rushing the quarterback because Harold Landry is a very good secondary rusher, in my opinion. He's a 10 to 12 sack guy with good versatility, can drop in coverage, but he's not the top tier pure pass rushers of Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett was who I was going to say, but I went with Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt.
Can't go wrong with any of them.
Harold Landry, Nick Bosa, Harold Landry is not at that level. So if you had Micah Parsons as your top edge rusher who can also play some off-ball linebacker with Harold Landry in a secondary role and then Jeffrey Simmons in the middle, T'Vondre Sweat works out, I think I would go I'm a pass rush guy. There's a conversation of, would you rather have a better secondary to help your pass rush? Would you rather have a great pass rush to help your secondary? My football philosophy as a man is I want to start with pass rush. So I would go with Micah Parsons, hit the Titans' two biggest needs on defense, and take probably the best young defensive player in the NFL. But that's a fun question to talk about. But I'll go with Micah Parsons.
Yeah, it's our closing question that I've been asking every guest on here, and I'm really grateful that Aaron Donald retired, because typically if somebody needed help up front, it's like we had to get rid of the quarterback because everybody was taking Pat Mahomes except for like 2 or 3 teams. So I'm like, all right, no more quarterback, but I can't go like, okay, you can't take this cornerback, you can't take this defensive guy. Like I couldn't put too many stipulations on it, but I'm really glad Donald retired, because typically that was one of the most popular answers last year.
You'll get more variety now, which is much more fun. I also consider Jamar Chase. I think, hot take, I think he's the best wide receiver in the NFL, the most talented wide receiver in the NFL. I know Justin Jefferson is the common answer, Tyreek Hill, but I love Jamar Chase, and he was just in Brian Callahan's system in Cincy. So thought about him, thought about Myles Garrett, thought about offensive line, but Michael Parsons is an animal, so I'll go with him.
This is show number 12 of 32, and you're the first person to say Michael Parsons. So,
what are the other common answers? I guess.
Well,
then
we did have two. We had 2 other guests that had said they almost went Michael Parsons, but they'll do this instead. So
you get like a Sauce Gardner, Patrick Surtain, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Yep. Have we had any other edge rushers? I think Parsons is our first edge rusher. I can't think of one.
I don't believe so. Yeah.
People don't respect the pass rush enough. God, I'm driving the boat, pushing the float. Pass rush, folks. That's if you either have quarterback or pass rush. That's what matters.
Well, one thing I've noticed is that most of our guests seem to be fairly happy with the pass rushers that they have on their team so far. And I think this is like episode, 10, 11, something like that. So, yeah. So, but I think also part of it is that there's a lot of young pass rushers that have been coming up the last couple drafts. So a lot of people might be kind of looking at it as, well, we kind of already got ours for the future, you know?
Yeah, well, 2025 is a huge defensive line draft. There's going to be a ton of edges, ton of interior defensive line, and that's music to my ears as a Titans fan, with my big concerns being edge and interior D line. I don't really care much about linebacker. Linebacker is like the running back of defense to me. I think you can get away with mid-round picks and veteran guys. And, if your pass rush and your secondary is good, your linebackers will do just fine. I know not everyone agrees with that, but that's just how I view roster building. But yeah, that's an interesting question. It's fun to hear some of the other answers people had. Not shocking, but still fun.
Yep.
Right.
All right, Justin, you want to go ahead and actually, Tyler, why don't we give you a minute here? Go ahead, talk about where everybody can follow your work, where they can follow you and support the work that you're doing for the Tennessee Titans. Because it's go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were done. I was going to say, and what your next project is. What's next on Locked On Titans?
Absolutely. So Locked On Titans, Monday through Friday, YouTube, any podcast app. I'm 5 days a week, 30 minutes all year round. I went on vacation for a week. I put out 5 shows. I had them ready to go. So I never miss a day ever. That's part of my commitment, is the energy and effort. That's what I'm always given. I'm also on Twitter at Tic Tac Titans. I have some hot takes. People get real mad at me. So whether you like me or hate me, it'll probably be enjoyable to follow me there. I also started a brand new film account on YouTube. It's called Tic Tac Titans, like my Twitter account is, where I just break down film. And I'm a Tennessee Titans guy, so I break down Tennessee Titans film. I've done Levis and Ridley and Hopkins and Skronsky and Tajay Spears, all kinds of stuff. I'm going to be covering the last week of Titans OTAs, which is this week coming up Monday through Thursday. So I'll be talking about that. But also I'm going to have some video breakdowns on my film channel for Roger McCreary as a slot cornerback, for Harold Landry getting back after the bye. I think other than that, I'm going to do a Lloyd Cushenberry breakdown as well from his Denver season to show people what he could bring to the table. So I'm going to have some film breakdowns on some guys the Titans have here over the summer to kind of keep everybody interested through the dark period that's right ahead. This 6-week stretch where there's literally nothing going on in the NFL. So I'll have some stuff there to keep people entertained. But I find a way, man. I think that's the number one skill of anybody in this industry, is finding fun stuff to talk about. Anybody can talk about games during the season. Can you find interesting things to discuss in the off season when nothing's happening? That's the challenge, in my opinion. So I think I do a pretty good job with that stuff. So no matter what's going on or not going on, we have fun over on the show. So Locked On Titans is my real baby. So I'll pump that last.
Absolutely.
As a jaded Colts fan, I think you should do a film breakdown of Anthony Richardson. It'll be a real quick one.
It's just an X-ray. You just put an X-ray up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, I took a bunch of heat from Colts fans this week on Twitter for pointing out the concern around Anthony Richardson and his injuries. But man, if he could stay healthy, he's just so talented. It's even if he's not, high level elite passer, his ability to run the ball, like he could be like a Cam Newton. You know what I mean? Yep. Like that's him at his peak. But the shoulder injuries definitely make you wonder, but people don't seem to be worried in Indy. They think he's going to be fine, and if he's fine, we're going to see some good battles.
I'm very worried. I've been worried since before the draft. Like, and now he's out here. We're 6 weeks away, and he's out there throwing left-handed right now. Like,
it seems like to me. See, I get hate from Titans fans all the time because I'm very realistic. I'm like, I don't like the sweat pick. There's a lot of risk. Blah 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 blah. And I apply that same look on How could you be a fan and not be a little worried about what's going on right now? Like he said that he's been sore the whole time. He's throwing left. Like why, if he's sore and he needs a day off and has to throw left-handed, why would you have him practicing the 2 days before? You think that you would just let him wait until he's not sore? I'm not a doctor though, so whatever. People yell at me. You don't know how it works. Blah blah blah. What? All I know is if it was my team, I would be worried. So I just apply that to any other team too, so it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, producer George is in my ear now, and he's telling me that that I need to quit making this about the Colts. This is a Titans show. So, Tyler, man, we really appreciate you coming on. You do a great job, and I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't associate with a Titan if you didn't do an incredible job. So, so we thank you for coming on. We thank you for your time, and all you guys out there watching this, make sure you check him out at Tic Tac Titan.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Subscribe to Toilets to Titles. Do it, folks.
Absolutely. Thank you.